You're listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. Today is April 16th, although we're going to be releasing it on the 17th, so that's when you're hearing it. And my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host, Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing this Tuesday evening time, I guess?
I am doing great. We have a huge week of news to talk about. It feels like a lifetime ago since the last time we talked about this game compared to what's going on now. Today is a big day around the WoW sphere, as you probably have already noticed by the time that you're hearing this. It's sort of the War Within's public debut. You know, there was an alpha event this week that we got a chance to play, and alpha will be rolling out publicly probably pretty shortly thereafter. So it's our first actual chance to see the content, to play with hero talents, to play delves, you know, all of these things that were debuted at BlizzCon, but were just sort of demo reels and there was no build on the floor or anything. This is our first chance to dig into it, and there's going to be a lot more information coming out about War Within, you know, starting today. It's really, they're moving fully into that cycle now. So it's really exciting. I think the stuff we got a chance to check out this week was really cool. And, well, we got some interesting information we'll talk about later in the show from devs. I had the opportunity to sit in on a Q&A with some of the development team and just listen to their responses to some questions to really fill in the gaps for some of this stuff that I think, you know, our audience is really going to be happy with. So I think the game's moving in a super cool direction, and I had a lot of fun with what I was playing in the alpha build that they let us get into. So, you know, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You know, I had some moments in the last couple months of like, am I going to get, you know, juiced back up when it's time for new expansion, when new stuff starts coming out? I don't know. You know, I've been pretty low energy when it comes to WoW for a good couple months now. You know, I don't know, but as soon as I got in there and they start kind of unraveling the story and, you know, flying around the new zone, which is just absolutely gorgeous, it's like, oh, right. Like it's those moments, you know, I think that keep WoW vital and fun for so long is when you kind of get that peek into the new chapter. And so that's where we're at this week. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's I certainly will not have as much to contribute as Jason does. He ended up getting into the alpha access like a week before I did. So I didn't get any access to alpha stuff until about 11 p.m. last night, which means I had enough time to make a character and put in talent points, which apparently, because alpha things reset when you log out and log back in. So didn't really accomplish as much as I was hoping to, but that is alpha builds. For those who haven't experienced what an alpha is like, particularly WoW-based alphas are actually quite a bit more complete than what you're used to seeing from other games, but they still have their little hiccups. And in this case, the hiccup that we run into frequently is that all of the stuff that you've put on your bars comes off your bars, and keybinds get messed around, and talents get
It's always that UI stuff that goes out the window with the alpha servers, it seems like. But so, it's a small price to pay to get an early look. But it does end up being kind of a time sink, and this was only a 2-day event. I think they're shutting the servers off tonight as we record on Tuesday night. So, you know, it was just a brief little window.
Yeah, and so that means that I don't have as much to add when it comes to delves and experience and look and feel, but I can say that it was exciting to sort of get in and have a look at things, and I was able to get to the new zone. That was the extent, although they have basically a large Tauren you talk to who just takes you to the new zone and unlocks all of your hero talents, and poked around through the hero talents a bit, and that was kind of neat to see. And we'll have more from the Q&A that Jason was able to attend earlier today. I was at work, so I wasn't able to do it. Jason sort of took his lunch hour, let's just say, to be able to listen to the Q&A and what was happening with that, which means that he has a little bit more to add about that as well. However, there's a lot more to talk about in World of Warcraft this week, but before we do, let's just mention what we got up to this past week. Jason, was there anything you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, kind of a bit of a busier week. We went in and did heroic Farok skip just to try to get people that Fearloth drop if they don't have it. It didn't work out that way for the one guy who I think was still looking for it. So we got one more chance for this season. We did go back and do the achievements finally, and they were mostly pretty fun. We didn't really have any issues getting them done. We got them done pretty fast. The only problem was we didn't quite have enough time to do like the 5 boss straight run through Heroic Amir Drasil and then do all of the achievements in 1 2-hour session. But we got everything done except the Farok achievement, and the main reason why we didn't get that done is because it was already late, and then you have to go back to the beginning of the instance and find these wisps all over the raid zone and then bring them to the Farok fight. So we got it done. It was great. We did it a week early. We planned to do it this reset, the last reset of the season, but because of attendance issues and other reasons, we just did it last week. Maybe we'll do some more again this week if anybody still needs them, but I thought they were fine. Nothing really stood out as like, oh, this achievement is incredible. There was kind of a good one with Volcaros where you have to activate this swag before you start the fight, and then the dragon frog, the horn swag things just start spawning in everywhere during the fight and chasing players around, and the boss sort of like eats them as the fight goes on, and you have to defeat him after he eats a certain amount of the frog. So that was pretty fun, but for the most part they were kind of what you'd expect from them. But nice to get that off the plate, get everybody their mounts, and get that done for the season. Ended up doing 4 keys for Vault. It wasn't a particularly bad week. We had a nice time running those. And my rogue buddy, who sort of was on and off, a little hot and cold earlier this season, ended up getting him above 2,500. So he got Keystone Hero done. He's got all his teleports, Not like a super auspicious run through the season, but he's not really missing anything important. So that was cool. I was glad we got that done for him, and I mean, he's one of my favorite people to play WoW with, so it's been great having him around these last few weeks, having him actually invested in it lately. Shockingly, I got my Fearloth done. I didn't really even know if I was going to do it, but I think what happened was I ended up getting all the Super Bloom stuff done, and that's really kind of the worst part. Like, Super Bloom's not fun to grind. I don't want to go sit around and do Super Bloom over and over again, or hop in there on the hour and try to jump into different group finder situations and shard hop. I just kind of would do my weekly, and eventually the drops that you needed stacked up. And I was like, okay, let me do the rest. So I got that. One funny anecdote about that was the very last part of it, you queue into a scenario in Aberrus where you have to like fight against the axe itself, and it sort of projects the essence of Farok, and you have to defeat all these fire elementals, and you have to like basically free the weapon from the corruption of Farok, right? You have to equip Fearloth in order to do this, which meant that for the first time ever in this expansion, I switched out of Protspec and into Fury. I just had to use like the starter build because I had never done it before. I didn't have any buttons set up.
Those starter builds are helpful. They really are.
Yeah, it did the trick. It was actually, the scenario was pretty cool. It reminded me almost of like the old Mage Tower stuff. It wasn't quite that hard, but it was sort of on that level of you have to do this right or else you don't get the prize. So it tested your skills a little bit. It was fun. It was a cool capper. It was the best part of the whole quest process. Everything else was kind of just needlessly expensive and time consuming. The Super Bloom part was the worst. The rest of it was okay. But so that's cool. I was glad to get that off the slate there at the end of season 3. And other than that, just been doing my daily plunder storm. I'm up to rank 35, so I'm almost done. And as of maintenance today, plunder equals double rep, which we were kind of talking about. Oh, it'd be cool if they would do some kind of rep modifier or holiday bonus weekend or something. We're getting like 2 full weeks of it. We know the plunder storm is getting shut off on the 30th, but from now until then, every plunder you earn gets you 2 points of renown. So it's awesome. I will probably just sit there and get my dailies in. It should be easy enough to get 1 rank a day from 1 or maybe 2 games, and then I'll be done. So I've sort of made my peace with it. I don't hate Plunder Storm as much as I did at first glance, because I really just didn't enjoy the process, and the grind seemed really long at first. I think they made a lot of smart fixes to it, and there are some merits to the gameplay mode itself, but it just didn't feel rewarding if all you were really looking at was that reward track. It just felt like so many games, and now it's like even if you haven't done it at all with the double renown, like you could get in there and still knock this out in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's definitely still possible for people to finish. I don't know why you need to wait to the last 2 weeks to do something like this. I think that's really a flawed strategy when it comes to it. I've been very adamant about how I feel about Plunderstorm and the rewards, and that really the reward track should have been something that could be finished in 5 to 6 hours for players, because then the players who want to participate in Plunderstorm would participate in Plunderstorm, and the ones who just wanted to get the reward track would be done, and then not feeling like it's a chore to have to log in every day to be able to get your daily done, to be able to do your reward for Plunderstorm. And this is a game mode. Battle Royale is a type of game, particularly for myself, where I have to be in the right headspace and mood to really enjoy this type of game mode. Otherwise, it's just very frustrating. So putting people in a situation where the sort of most efficient way to do this is to log in every day and get your daily done means that more often than not, I'm logging in when I'm not in the right mood for doing something like this, which means I just get really frustrated and I dislike the game mode, and I sort of rant about how I dislike the game mode because of that, when really it's a decent game mode. The issue was they made a chore out of it, sort of like what they did with Torghast. Like, it's a similar kind of situation where it was a fun game mode, it was enjoyable on its own, but at the moment it becomes part of like a, hey, if you want to get this done, you really need to be getting in there, that's unfortunate. And so I wish this double stuff had just been from the get-go. Like, it still is going to take players, 12 to 15 hours to be able to finish this thing up, depending on how you're placing and what you're getting plunder-wise. But that's doable in the next 2 weeks, 6 hours a week or 7 hours a week of putting in a Plunderstorm. Yes, that is probably the majority of your game time that you have to play in the next week. But if you wanted to get these things, you can get them. I finished mine about 2 weeks ago, is when I finished up my ranking. I basically had a Saturday where I just sat down a Sunday where I just sat down and like for 3 or 4 hours played Plunderstorm and just got high placing after it was like firsts and seconds and thirds and firsts and seconds and that kind of thing. And that just cranked through it pretty quickly. But I was in the mood to play it. That was really what it came down to. Like, it was at that point where I was enjoying myself. It was the right mental space for me to be able to do it. I was 34 when I started, or 35 when I started that day. So it wasn't a ton of renown left, which meant I sort of had that motivation to be like, I just can get this done. Let's just get this done.
Right. Once you can see the finish line, it does start to feel a little bit different.
Yeah. And, I haven't logged in since, to be honest. Like, I have not tried Plunderstorm since that happened. I think I would have been much more engaged and willing to sort of jump in there and try it more often had I not had to do it on a daily basis for a big chunk of time and built up this like intolerance for it, even though it's a decent game mode that's got good design in it and I think has a future. Just let's rework reward track stuff so it's not, I guess, as much of a slog for players who just kind of want to get the rewards. And let's also not celebrate that we're doubling the experience in the last 2 weeks. Let's just do that from the get-go. Let's just make this easier sooner. What? I don't get it. I don't understand that. I understand helping people push to the end and finish it. I just don't know why we had to wait till the last 2 weeks to do that.
I see the logic in kind of starting slow, right, with dishing out the rewards, and then you kind of see and tweak it and what feels good and whatever. Yeah, I think maybe, I mean, I played one game with the double rep modifier and it felt great. I got like 3,500 rep or something. I got more than a full rank and it's like, This is perfect. If that was my daily every day for this whole process, I'd already be done. And I would feel good about it. And just anecdotally, what I mostly see in Plunderstorm lobbies is people in chat just complaining about having to do this mode in order to get rewards for the main game.
Yep.
And I mean, those people, their complaints are valid, but like, I don't know. I guess I haven't approached it on that level because I've really just been doing like daily games, and I'll sit down, I'll play my one game, get my quest done, and, because now the other night I did play quite a few games. I was like, I feel like playing some Plunderstorm. I'm going to play a few. So I played probably 3 or 4, which is like 3 to 4 times more than I usually play in a day, right? But I was like, I could sit here and grind a few more ranks and just get a little bit closer, but I have a feeling I should wait because I'll bet you they do some kind of couple week, thing, and then the next day they announce it. And I was like, I'm really glad I didn't grind those games out last night. Right. That would have felt pretty bad.
With your finite time that you have to play video games, you'd spent it doing something else that you wanted to do, and so now you can save that finite time, which could have been saved the entire time along. Like you said, you could already be done had they just done this earlier. So I don't know. I struggle with the reward system for something like this because the longer you draw out people having to sit in the game mode to get the rewards, the more you have those people in the lobby who are complaining about having to be there to get the rewards.
Yeah.
right?
It's the worst experience for everybody, right?
It
Yeah,
is.
you have people with
So-
bad attitudes coming into it. They're already wired to not have fun. They're making the
Exactly.
game worse for other players
Exactly.
that you have to play with in a multiplayer
Yep.
mode. So yeah,
Yep. I would much rather people get in there, get the rewards, get out if they don't like the game mode, never have to look at it again and go, you know what? It was all right. Like I didn't mind it. At least I was able to get the rewards pretty quickly. And that's their opinion of it, as opposed to, I hate this game mode. It's terrible. I don't want to be here. Yeah, if I can make someone else's life who's doing this worse, I'm going to. Like that's why would you want to play video games with those people, right? But that's what Blizzard's fostering in this sort of thing. And I think that's unfortunate when they do that. Anyways, that's enough Plunderstorm chat. The other stuff I got up to this past week was I'm still doing the classic season discovery rating stuff. Sunken Temple prog, and I use the word prog because it is prog. It's been interesting doing blind polls. So we did blind polls all the way through this week up to Shade of Aranicus, which was last night. We're doing Shade of Aranicus, who I still believe they need to do tweaks to this place, man. We worked on Shade of Aranicus for 3 hours before we killed it. And then we called it a night, obviously, because 3 hours is the max of our raid time. But, like, we have 9 melee in our group, okay? Everyone's experienced raiders. Everyone's been farming gear. Like, someone's done like 127 princess runs to try and get their wand and try and get their sword and trying to get their, like, people have been, like, they're geared, right? We've cleared the previous bosses up to this. We get to this boss. It's a blind poll, so the first 5 or 6 polls are just figuring out mechanics. We get to the last mechanic, which is Scalebinder spawn, these particular dragon ads. So Aranicus basically does a few abilities. There is one-shot ability that's a little bit unforgiving that involves you having to like get into a safety zone basically before the ability happens or it kills everybody, and you have about 5 seconds or 4 seconds to do so, which in Classic people don't move very quickly, so that is like a tight window. But the last phase of this, he's spawning ads, and the ads he spawns are Scalebinders, which do something called Acid Rain, which puts these like gold circles on the ground that are not very visible. They're like what you'd expect from a raindrop, basically coming from the sky. And if you get hit by them, they deal 1,000 damage, which for anyone who's curious, in Season of Discovery, people have about 3,000 hit points. So it's a third of your health for each raindrop you get hit by. When they cast it, it's like Rain of Fire size. And 2 of them spawn at a time. And there's no limit to how many of them can be up at the same time. And so if you don't have the right amount of cleave DPS inside your group, which, well, let me tell you, when you have the composition that we have, we do not have the cleave composition in our group to be able to deal with these things, even single target them and focusing on them. There were like 16 to 17 of these things running around, and they were casting rain everywhere, and all sorts of stuff was happening. And we eventually got to the point where we just decided, hey, you know what? We just have to try and kill the boss and focus the boss. And that ended up with me as the healer, basically pulling a ton of healing aggro, having 15 or 16 of these things run at me hopping into the safety bubble, which stuns you for 13 or 14 seconds, but makes you take 99% reduced damage, and just tanking for those 14 seconds before dying. And then another healer would do the same thing. They'd pull a bunch of healing aggro, jump into this thing, tank all these ads as more of them keep spawning out for 14 seconds and then die. And like that was our strategy for killing the boss. And we killed it with 1 person left alive, that whole, big finale finish of managing to actually get the boss. But it should not be that tight of a thing. You should not have unlimited caps on these ads spawning. That's just like, this is supposed to be a difficulty mode that is clearable for folks and farmable and fun in an 8-week cycle. Like it's phase 3. This isn't the final phase. You're not going to be in it for 3 or 4 months. We're in it for 2 months. So let's get this place cleared. We're now going to week 3 of this thing being out, and we haven't cleared the raid yet. Like every other previous raid we'd cleared in week 1. Week 2 was another clear, and now we're going to week 3. We still haven't cleared the place yet. We haven't even seen the last boss yet. Like, they need to address trash health and reducing that amount of trash that we're dealing with. They need to address some of the bosses in here. This needs to be easier content for folks so that they can get through it faster. And hey, you know what? If you're someone who wants these bosses to be really difficult and to progress on them, remove some DPS from your raid. That's my suggestion. Bring 18 people. Bring 16 people. You will have to prog on these bosses. They are capable to kill with that few DPS, because we did it with DPS dead through most of the fight. And you definitely feel like it's a progression boss when you're doing that. But yeah, if you bring a few less people, it will feel like a progression fight. And you can be like, yes, we killed it with 16 that's so cool of us. We can hoist up our flag if that's what you want to do, right? But I do think that they need to look at these bosses and address the fact that teams are not completing the raid yet, and they need to be able to do that in a night, and it needs to be fun, and it needs to be like an enjoyable experience for everyone. I had a good time. I enjoy raiding with people, and I have sat through way worse progs before, especially, coming off Jailer and everything for the last chunk of prog that I did. But it is one of those things to me where I understand what Season Discovery is supposed to be. There's actually a post that came out this past week, which I wanted to mention in the show today, specifically talking about that. So I'm hoping that we see them continue in the direction of nerfing this stuff, because it needs the nerfs. It just does. Like, we shouldn't be in a situation where it's like, oh, sorry, you don't have 4 fire mages, you can't keep up with the AoE. That's it. Like,
yeah, it's all part of the identity crisis, I think, that SOD is experiencing, where it's like, who is this for? I thought it was a more casual experience, but it's certainly not for me. I can't play it casually in any kind of meaningful way, so I had to step out. And I'm surprised. Like, I mean, it sounds like the raid launched way too high, and they dialed it back quick, but not far enough, and they've let it sit too long like this. I mean, people should be tearing through this. It's a level up raid. It shouldn't be something that you're getting stuck on or trying to prog through on a week-to-week basis, because Phase 4 is right around the corner. So hopefully they hit it a bit harder here, in the last month or so that it's going to be around, or however long it's going to be. Because I don't know who it's really serving, except like the most hardcore classic WoW players, which obviously they need stuff to do too. But I think more people would be, sticking with SOD if it was meeting their expectations more.
yeah, and so the post I wanted to mention, and I'll just cover it now because I might as well, because we're talking on the topic, and then we can sort of put Season Discovery to rest for the rest of the show, and then we can move into what's going on this week and everything else. All right. This is a post from Agrind, who went up on Twitter and sort of did a description for this, which really outlines who Season Discovery is being designed for, which says, being very honest, the goal is for very semi-casual guilds to kill Season Discovery raids fairly quickly, especially these level up raids. I'm sorry if your guild wants a heroic level challenge, but Season Discovery just isn't that. The raid that went out last week was just very overtuned. This was week 2 talking about week 1, and far beyond our intent for a variety of reasons I won't bore you with here. Not to say there won't be anything critical in Season Discovery that's hard, but we don't currently believe the critical path of raiding, i.e. clearing the raid each week and getting good gear from it, should be hard in this version of Vanilla Classic. There are other versions of WoW that are very, very difficult content. In fact, there are more versions of WoW than not that have very difficult content. As it stands now, both Nomer and even post-nerf Sunken Temple are vastly more challenging and require way more coordination than original WoW. One thing we like about various flavors of Classic is that in many cases, the difficulty of raiding in vanilla WoW is what players create for themselves by pushing their performance in things such as speedruns and the like. I think long-term, we'd like to do better supporting those types of emergent playstyles, but making raids a brick wall for the average Joe isn't the approach we'll likely take. I understand that may disappoint some folks, but after several years of watching data around Classic player behavior, we don't believe difficult raid content is what players actually want on this side of the WoW spectrum. Individuals and some groups may want it, but by large, is what I think that's supposed to be. But by large, most people seem to just want to chill and blast stuff with their friends, and that's the goal we'd like to aim for the average guild. And he goes on and replies to some other people who sort of want to discuss that with him on Twitter, but I think in general, you get a pretty clear picture that what Season Discovery is supposed to be for is like your average Joe to just get in and have a good time, and it shouldn't be that challenging. And so I still don't think they're at that mark yet with Sunken Temple. I want to see more nerfs to it. I do know we got buffs to some things today. I know that Paladin finally is going to be the new Shaman for Alliance side. Shamans right now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but they have the ability essentially to be a mana battery for the raid to an extreme amount. So much so that they are buffing the Paladin ability that does the similar thing by 133% to try and bring it on par with what the Shaman's been doing up to this point. So one of the reasons why Alliance teams seem to suffer so much with mana inside raids, and Horde ones are able to like run fewer healers and do a lot of other things is because of this. So I'm hoping that is another shift that can happen, because I know even for myself, when I'm looking at gearing right now, I am leaning a lot more towards mana regen and being able to sustain mana than, hey, I want my heals to hit harder or land harder, because it's almost about that, being able to last through the whole fight as opposed to dealing with actually, hey, I don't know if this heal is going to actually full heal somebody. So I'm glad to see that change coming. I hope it helps along the way, but I do think they need to look at things, especially like Shade of Aranicus, where it's like, hey, this boss is able to spawn an infinite amount of ads. Perhaps we should set the number at 6. And there can never be more than 6 of these things up at a time, right? And then you could potentially have like people using CC chains where they're fearing them and hibernating them and sleeping them and, all that sort of thing, as opposed to having to deal with killing them, since it's happening during the final 20% of the boss, which is your burn phase anyways. Let's just do that instead. So I am hopeful that they sort of address some of this stuff going forward, but I want this week of raid to be a one night clear, and we haven't even seen the last boss yet, and I don't know if that's going to happen. So gotta wait and see what we can do. Okay, when it comes to what's going on this week, I guess we'll just hop into that right now. All right, this week in World of Warcraft, we actually know everything that's going on because it's been a little bit since we recorded after a reset, which is kind of neat. So the World Quest bonus event is happening. This means the Sign of the Emissary buff is up, increasing the reputation gains from World Quest by 50%. And there's a quest to complete 10 of them, which rewards 250 rep to a major faction of your choice, including Loam Niffen and the Dream Wardens. So if you're trying to catch up on reputation, it's a great time to do it. If you want to go back to Legion, do some World Quest back then, get yourself some extra mounts and pets and that kind of stuff from those Paragon bags. Another great time to do that stuff. Any sort of reputation that you're working on from an era expansion that has world quests. BFA is another one. You can go back, knock those things out, get 50% increased reputation. Definitely worthwhile doing. So be sure you're taking advantage of the reputation gains when you can, because this is up and live and going.
Yeah, and Loam Niffen's always one of those reps that people seem to have just kind of skipped out on or not really put time into season 2. Maybe I kind of understand that the Zerlik Cavern outdoor content wasn't everybody's favorite.
Yeah.
So this is an easy way to get a free rank of Loam Niffen rep. It's just right there. You do 10 world quests and you get 1 rank of Loam Niffen rep.
Yep.
And if you have maxed out renown on a character and you do this, then you get a free 1 rank token that you can send to another character. So that's pretty nice too. I send all my stuff to my monk. I'm just sitting there with a ton of these various rep tokens from all these factions and all these types of rewards. So at some point I'll either cash them in, or maybe if there's some reason to in season 4 to complete weeklies or something, maybe I'll send them back to the main. We'll see.
Yeah, if you're trying to get Loam Niffen too, be sure you go and visit their main base down in the cave, so you can pick up their quest for reputation for the week, because the actual quest for completing 10 world quests will then complete if you choose the Loam Niffen quest, and then you're doubling up, right? You're basically using one quest to complete the other quest, which then you get even more reputation for Loam Niffen and progress.
Yeah, you get reputation for doing the quest for Loam Niffen to get Loam Niffen rep. So like you get that quest and then do your 10 world quests, then get your Loam Niffen token, then use that, then go turn in the Loam Niffen rep quest for more Loam Niffen rep. So yeah, it works out pretty well if you need season 2 rep still.
Exactly. All right, the brawl this week is Soshore versus Terran Mill. This is originally introduced back at the WoW 10-year anniversary. Man, they're gonna have to revamp this again. Like, we're hitting that point this year. November, we should see what happens with Soshore Terran Mill with the 20-year. All right. Yes. So I guess that first came back then. It's a 40-on-40 deathmatch. If you haven't actually experienced this before, it's pretty hilarious. You basically have Soshore pre-cataclysm, pre-plagued area happening, where you can spawn in there as Alliance and all the Horde over at the Terran Mill, which hasn't changed too much. And basically you run at each other and clash into each other and battle it out, 40 versus 40. I think in their case, it's about how much reinforcements you have. And when you run out of reinforcements, you actually win. But basically whatever team has the most Death Knights tends to win, because you just yoink people in from the opposing faction and into your 40-man death ball and just kill them all. And just don't overextend. It's my best tip. If you can convince people not to overextend towards the opponent's graveyard, that's good, because otherwise they will just spawn faster than you can kill them, and they will eventually push you back, and then you lose a bunch of reinforcements. So just hold the line and have your Death Knights yank people in.
Yeah, pretty much. There's not a lot of technique here. It's very fast paced. It's very fun. If you want some HKs, like this is the place to do it because they're just everywhere. And yeah, that's the number one thing. Don't push into the graveyard. Don't get greedy. Just don't get too deep, and then you can win.
Yeah. All right, Aurastar the Hibernator, the big rune bear, is up in the Emerald Dream. If you want to get yourself some 441 loot, get out there and knock over the bear. This is also a good way to get yourself that rune bear form, so be sure you're taking out Aurastar. Mythic Plus affixes for the week are Fortified, Volcanic, and Spiteful, meaning non-boss enemies have more health and deal increased damage, while in combat, enemies periodically cause gouts of flame to erupt beneath the feet of distant players, and Fiends rise from the corpses of non-boss enemies to pursue random players. Okay, so it's not the best trash week, but you're going to do well on bosses. I'll give you that. When it comes to Fortified, you are going to have the healthier trash. Spiteful Fortified means trash takes longer to kill, and then Spiteful adds spawn, which then lock you in combat for longer and chase people around. Yes, their health decays over time, and you can root them and whatever it is, but it is just kind of a pain to deal with. So you can also DPS them down. That's something you need to do. But for any class like Rogues who enjoy breaks between combat, when you're pulling from one pack to the next, that little 1 second out of combat when they can re-stealth and be able to re-engage and that kind of thing, this is not the week for you. This is a very sad week for you because Spiteful Adds will lock you in combat, and most likely your group will be moving on to the next pack while that Spiteful Ad's still up, which means you never get a break between it. It also means healers don't get a chance to drink, although drinking is not nearly as big of a deal as it used to be inside of Mythic Plus. There's enough other abilities out there now that sort of keep you sustained a bit better, which is good, and people can tend to find little breaks here and there to deal with that. But yeah, I don't think this is the worst possible Fortified week because Volcanic doesn't necessarily affect players in a really big way. It tends to focus on distant players, which means if you do have a hunter or if your healer has to be ranged, if there's not a monk or a paladin healer, if it's a ranged healer, then they are going to have to deal with it more often and sort of shift their feet a little bit more often to sort of dodge these volcanics. But it's almost like a non-issue. We aren't dealing with the Karazhan floor rugs where you can't see the spawn. There's only a few bosses where you actually need to sort of plant your feet for a period of time, and those can kind of come up as an issue with Volcanic where you might have to shimmy a little bit to get out of something. But I think in general, this is a decent Fortified week. At least we're not dealing with bursting, because bursting is just way more painful than Spiteful, in my opinion. It's an irritating trash week, but I think most people will probably steamroll a lot of the lower end keys on this week with Fortified Volcanic.
Yeah, it's not the worst. It's not the best either. I mean, Spiteful is just a time sink, It's going to cost you time. It's going to keep you in combat. There's a couple instances where that does mean in some of these dungeon stuff doesn't trigger yet until you get out of combat. It's just obnoxious, but there's plenty of ways to play around it, and there's nothing super class or spec specific that you're going to be looking for this week. Pretty much every class and spec has tools to deal with Volcanic and or Spiteful, because you either need to just reposition out of the Volcanic or recover in some way from the disruption, and you need to either kill, avoid, or CC the Spiteful. So everybody can do some combination of some of that, so that's okay.
It's also your last Fortified week this week, isn't it? That's the last one you get.
It is, yeah. This is the last week of Season 3, so anything that you want that's tied to raiding, if you need any teleports or whatever, this is your last chance. The whole dungeon pool is getting refreshed in Season 4. That includes Dawn of the Infinite. Dawn of the Infinite will still be accessible Season 4 content, but it's going to go back to basically a mega dungeon type of scenario. So it will give good loot, but not the super high-end mythic keystone loot, and you will not be able to get the teleport to it or anything because it won't be in the pool. So if you don't have 20s in time, this is your last shot, this reset. And I don't think this is a particularly bad week for that. I mean, I think, most of this pool is going to be pretty decent, pretty doable. I think of Everbloom is always the one, right? Everbloom is going to just suck with Spiteful because you have so many mobs in there that are all on death eligible. All the Lasher packs and all that, they all do the on death stuff. So that's all Spitefuls that you're going to have to, work around. And the timer in there is not super forgiving compared to, I've had Black Rook hold runs where we have 20 plus deaths and the timer's still a breeze, there are easier and harder dungeons in this pool, but overall, I mean, this week is okay. It's just buckle up for trash. It's going to take longer than you want it to. And yeah, and something like Dawn of the Infinite, it really stinks because you have the movement mechanics, right? Like the teleporter things and whatever. And so you got to wait for combat to drop to get out of some of those places. So, you just you gotta plan accordingly. You gotta pull. I think it's probably not a bad idea to pull big on packs where you can safely do that. If stuff's just like meleeing your tank or whatever, like Volcanic is a non-issue, and Spiteful's only going to matter when stuff starts dying. So you are going to need to, shave off some time somewhere. You got to be careful that you're not pulling casters that you can't control or something, and then people are getting blown up.
Yeah, exactly. All right, hotfixes for the week are not super major. As you'd expect right before a patch, they're not going to do a ton of change now since they're about to do a huge maintenance and release a big patch. So we got some class fixes for Balance and Feral Druids. The 4-piece, the damage dealt by Berserk and Frenzy and Burning Frenzy for Season 3 and 4 set armor for 4-piece will now log correctly when buffed by an Augmentation Evoker. That wasn't logging correctly for those who were like, oh, Warcraft Logs is saying I'm not doing something. Yes, it's now correct. Don't worry about that. And then they made Primordial Arcanic Pulsar progression now resets with the raid encounter start, which every Boomkin now thanks everyone for, because that's always the biggest frustration when you do a pull, you wipe, the pull resets, and you don't have your abilities back up. So it's great to have that happening from someone who's playing Season of Discovery and hearing someone use Shield Wall and then they can't use it for 30 minutes. Yeah, that's a thing. That's a Season of Discovery thing. So I understand how nice it is to have abilities reset when you pull a boss and wipe on a boss. As far as items go, they went in and they basically went through and reworked a bunch of trinkets. They added 1-second global cooldowns to the Manic Grief Torch, Beacon of Beyond, Baelor the Sun Caller, and Algathar's Puzzle Box. So if you're using any of those, there's now a 1-second global cooldown that you can use that's going to be triggered on it. So keep that in mind. And outside of that, they just sort of did a bunch of damage adjustments on trinkets, which is what you'd expect them to be sort of going through and do to make sure that these trinkets aren't stronger, like better than, if you will, the stuff that you're going to be getting from Season 4 next week. So we'll see that shift up that way.
This is all like pre-Season 4 housekeeping, right? Because a lot of these are Season 2 trinkets or Season 1 trinkets even. So they're kind of getting out in front of them, I guess, as far as the tuning goes.
Yeah.
I assume that we're going to start with Vault of the Incarnates for Season 4. So stuff like Manic Grief Torch comes into play. And I would think that this will probably not be the last round of this that we see. But yeah, for the most part, I think they were bringing all this stuff down just to prevent anything from coming out of the gate just like super OP. I guess it's okay, but hopefully there is stuff that's still strong and feels good enough that you want to spend your bullion on and blow stuff up here at the end of the expansion. Like I understand that they want to have some kind of baseline and they don't want stuff to just be the correct answer, but we still want strong items, man. Like I want Beacon to the Beyond to be awesome for Season 4. Like that's what's fun about doing the Season 4 concept. So there was also there was a bug with Whispering Incarnate Icon, which is a really popular Season 2 trinket as well. It was just procking way more stats than it was supposed to. So, stuff like that obviously has to get fixed, but we'll see where it all ends up and how it shakes out is what the meta trinkets are. There've been some really powerful and cool trinkets in this expansion. So, Season 4 is neat because it's the whole raid and Dragonflight Keystone pool of trinkets are all on the table, and we can put these combos together that never would have existed really, together in any individual season. So I'm excited to see which ones end up being the go-to, because man, I really loved Beacon of the Beyond. That was a super fun trinket, and I didn't have a Grief Torch. That's not really a thing I would have been using at the time, but watching people just blast the Grief Torch was super fun in Season 1.
Well, that's certainly something that I'm hoping they balance out going into the next season so folks can still use what they like to use, because it is fun to press the big button and make the fun things happen. That's something that even Ian has talked about back in the day. All right. Mists of Pandaria remix. All right, this is when we talked about, oh hey, Cataclysm Classic's coming out. I was like, man, I don't think I'm going to play Cataclassic at all, but I sure would play a Mists of Pandaria Classic. And they're like, guess what? We have something for you. Apparently, World of Warcraft does not have enough flavors. This is the latest flavor that they are releasing. It's a limited time event where players get to re-experience the entirety of Mists of Pandaria expansion at an accelerated rate from level 10 through 70. All loot has been completely overhauled and has new powerful effects allowing players to shape their experience, power up, and power on. The features in there include, obviously, the accelerated leveling, which allows you to take on nearly every quest, scenario, dungeon, and raid, create a new WoW remix character, starting at level 10 to adventure all the way up to 70. A mountain of loot is what they are saying is going to be out there. You get powerful gems from quests and chests and creatures and bosses, customizable items that allow you to power up and sort of progress through more difficult content. There's converting unwanted items into bronze, which can then be used to upgrade items or purchase cosmetics. And you get to keep everything from this limited time event to bring with you into the War Within. So basically these characters, I believe they already said, are going to essentially at the end of this get moved into the live game on your account, so that they will bring over all the rewards that you have earned once you've actually finished all of that up. And you do not need to... What was that?
Correct. This is a bit of a weird concept that they're doing, but it's cool. You're basically designating that a character that you make is going to be participating in the Pandaria remix.
Yeah.
You will make the characters on existing retail servers. And you can, what they're saying at the moment is you can even be in a guild with people who are playing Dragonflight, right? Like you can just be in your retail guild and you can hop over to your remix tune. So that's a lot less overhead, you know. And I think it keeps it a lot more streamlined for people who want to dive in and check it out. We knew we were getting some kind of time running and that it was going to be Pandaria themed a few months ago, and never in my wildest dreams would I have thought it was going to be like this. This is a much more in-depth and expansive.
Yes, expansive is definitely the word I'd use.
Experiment.
Yeah.
Like this is massive. I was thinking like, you know, oh, they'll reuse Pandaria content somehow, and maybe we'll have, you know, I don't know, something's going to come back, or there's going to be, you know, some time walking raid type stuff or whatever. This is like a whole different universe and very experimental in terms of gearing and leveling up and everything like that. It's almost like Season of Discovery-esque, but inside of, you know, a like retail WoW. It is going to use Dragonflight classes, characters, combat data. So like you could play an Evoker or a Demon Hunter or something in Pandaria, and you'll have your familiar like Dragonflight abilities and talents, but you're in this like super time accelerated leveling process through Pandaria content. So it's a really cool idea.
Yeah. So the leveling process, they basically laid out what they expect players to do, which is you can start in Jade Forest, you can then move to Valley of the Four Winds, Kunlai Summit, Townlong Steeps, Dread Waste, Vale of Eternal Blossoms, Isle of Giants, or the Timeless Isle, and then Isle of Thunder. You could do any of those zones from 10, you can do Jade Forest from 10 to 70. They put the floor different, but you should be able to actually level entirely through one zone if you really want to. But yes, the floor is 10 to inside of Jade Forest, 20 in Valley, 25 for Kunlai, 30 for Townlong, 35 for Dreadwaste, 40 for Vale, 45 for Timeless Isle, and 50 for Isle of Thunder. And then everything else is just up to 70. They do mention that there's Throne of Thunder in here, there's Siege of Orgrimmar in here, there's Heroic Raids in here, we got Mogushon Vaults, we got Heart of Fear, we got the Terrace of Endless Spring. You know, all the dungeons are back for doing those things. The scenarios are all back that, you know, people experienced. So if you wanted to, you know, redo the assault on Zanvest, you can redo the assault on Zanvest. That's a thing. It's back. You can actually do that. The rewards that you can get, there's a vendor named Horos that you can go to that you can buy stuff off of for this bronze currency that they talk about. They got Ali Skymere. They got the Salian Battle Banner. They got the Pandaria Firework Launcher. You got the Mogu Haze Blazer mount, along with the Reigns of the Tropical Riding Crane, Little Red Riding Goat, Jade Pterodox, and the Reigns of the Dashing Windsteed. I did see that they put up the Shaw mount, also went up in there at one point recently. I saw someone on Twitter talking about that, and it's like ultra expensive, but if you're someone who's been farming for your Shaw mount forever, this is a way that you can essentially grind a game mode to get a currency to then purchase that mount. So that's another thing that they're throwing in there. So there's a lot of rewards that players are after. There's a lot of transmog, a lot of, you know, toys and pets. There's a lot of stuff limited time to this event. So there's definitely a huge motivation to get in there and play it. I don't know what this time investment looks like. I don't know what the leveling time investment looks like. They say accelerated. We don't really know what accelerated means. Does this mean you can get from 10 to 70 in, 8 hours? Does this mean that you know, have to get there over 24 hours? Like what's this feel like? So I think that's something that, you know, I have to wait and see. And I know some people have played around this on PTR and they were sort of talking about it a bit. So I'm not sure what this is going to go live as, but that part's exciting. The mechanics that are new, as I talked about getting new gems and that sort of idea, there's new loot. There's these things called meta gems and tinker gems. And there's a cloak that's in there that they sort of highlight in this post. So the meta gems are basically, well, I'll read the part here. Players have the opportunity to collect a variety of items from just about anywhere. And these new customizable items will be yours for taking, yours for the taking, and each item slot has their own unique identity with spell gem sockets. These sockets come in with exciting turbocharged new effects similar to trinkets. Each time you loot a new item, you'll have the chance for powerful new upgrades, allowing you to push the limits further and faster than ever before with uncapped progression. Uncapped progression. That is crazy. If you can actually just infinitely upgrade things, that's going to be pretty bizarre for players. As you progress, you'll gradually become more and more powerful as items also grant increased permanent stats. Whoa. All right, here's some examples of the gem.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
Like, we'll see how this feels, and I haven't had a chance to play it in PTR. I might have to get in this week because I got to just get a taste. But like, some of this sounds like the kind of stuff that around TSZ we've been asking for since like BFA went away, with like just being able to stack stats on top of stats on gear that you have just from investing time in the game. Like, you can do that in this mode to some degree, and it sounds really cool. So that really piques my interest. And also, I mean, this is level up raids. You know, we're getting that content in a more modern version of the game, which is really cool. Like, that was such a wacky idea just a few months ago in SOD, and now we're getting like a Pandaria flavored version of it. Like, I was reading through this. This came out, I think, the day after we recorded last week, and I'm just like, what are you guys even talking about? Like, this is such a huge swing that like I can't tell if it's going to be a massive success or people are just not going to know what to do with it. But I love that they're trying something like this. Like, this is totally outside of the box from what we're used to.
Yeah. So there's 3 different types of gem slots. There's the meta socket, tinker socket, and cog wheel socket. As far as metas go, one of the examples they give here is the thundering orb, where you put this gem into your gear and you transform into a thundering orb, inflicting nature damage to enemies within 30 yards over 4 seconds. While you are a thundering orb, damage taken is reduced by 50%, but your movement speed is also reduced by 70%, and you are immune to loss of control effects. So you basically become just this radiating orb of thunder that just damages everything around you and you take reduced damage. Cool little thing. Another example of a meta gem, the coalesce, an orb of you coalesce. This is the Oblivion Sphere, the Oblivion Sphere. Coalesce an orb of pure void that increases critical strike damage taken by enemies within 15 yards by 50% for 10 seconds. After 4 seconds, the orb explodes, inflicting shadow damage. So yeah, basically like, hey, are you hitting your, big fire mage streak of crits? Great. Let me just essentially have this Oblivion Sphere make you do 50% increased damage. Like, this can be crazy. Some of these things are nuts.
It sounds really fun. Like, your meta gems, I think, are going to go in your helm socket. And one thing we know is you're going to have the ability to unsocket a gem. So if you have a gem you really like, you don't have to reacquire it or whatever just because you got a helmet that you like better, which is wonderful. We've kind of seen some of this stuff over the last couple years, like in 9.1 and in, what was it? 10.0.7, whatever we had the annulet, it kind of reminds me a little bit of that, where you have these really powerful kind of mix and match effects on a couple slots on your gear, and you can take the gems with you and move them around. Just got to make sure you don't accidentally overwrite them, because that will destroy it, but you will be able to swap the gems around at will, which is a really nice quality of life feature, for when if you want to have different builds for different types of content or whatever. You don't have to have multiple sets of gear or whatever, and you don't have to be constantly reacquiring stuff. You just pop the gem out, reset it up, and go do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, the Tinker's one here, I want to use an example for us healing folk and other folk out there. This one grants a shield absorbing damage equal to 20% of your total health, and the shield will regenerate after not suffering any damage for 10 seconds. So if you're someone, even like a tank swap mechanic, this is a crazy thing to have. So every time you tank swap, essentially you're going in with this 20% absorb shield and not taking any real big hits. Or if you need someone just to soak one big hit, that's another great way to do it. Or if there's that large raid AoE that happens every 30 seconds, this thing will kick in every single time and you just don't take that 20% damage. Like, it's very neat to see these sorts of effects thrown onto gems. And as Jason said, like, these are going to be available to folks to just kind of put in there. The cogwheel ones are like utility. So literally, these are the 3 cogwheels: blink, sprint, and roll. So guess what? Blink is a blink. It goes into your cogwheel spot and it teleports you 10 yards forward until reaching an obstacle and frees you from all stuns and bonds. Sprint increases your movement speed by 70% for 8 seconds. And roll is roll for a short distance. So you literally just get other classes' abilities if you want by just throwing this in there.
You get to pick your movement ability of choice. I think the Tinker Gem slot, I think, is on your bracers. I could be wrong. Again, I haven't played PTR yet, so don't be gentle, please. Your Cogwheel slot is on your feet, and I think there's one Cogwheel Gem for each class's like signature movement ability, which means that everybody's just going to be heroic leaping.
Blink is great, right? Man. I like Blink.
Blink is really good. I assume there's probably no benefit to having like the same thing more than once. Like you're going to get like an extra charge. So I would probably go Blink on a warrior or something. I'm going to play warrior, obviously. But what a cool thing, man. Just like this modular way. I mean, depending on what content you're doing too, you may want a different movement ability. If you have the Cogwheel Gem, you just swap it out. And now you have that for whatever it is that you're doing.
I'm just picturing druids inside of Warsong Gulch using sprint and having their dash into sprint into like, right. Oh my God.
They just never stop running fast.
They'll never stop running fast. They're just gone all the time, man. It's going to be interesting to see what this content feels like for sure. The Cloak of Infinite Potential is basically an artifact cloak that gains permanent power increases as you play. The power you earn on your strongest character is shared with your alternate characters. So if you're someone who wants to level multiple characters in this event, which, hey, might be a really good thing to do if you're someone who's like, you know what, I want to get a bunch of alts all together. Or I don't even know if heritage stuff is available to be earned during this event, but that would be a great way to get a bunch of heritage stuff done, is power leveling characters through this. So the cloak also grants the following Time Runner's Advantage, which basically is just a increase to strength, stamina, crit, leech, mastery, versatility, and experience gain. So this is the crazy part, right? You level up your first character and you keep increasing the power on your cloak, and your experience gain gets up to 350% experience gain on this cloak or something, right? Because you can just keep pumping it up bigger and bigger. You put the cloak on your alt and you go to level that character. Now, not only are you progressing at the accelerated rate that they've already put into the game, you're doing it 400% faster than you normally would. And so you complete a quest and you get 6 levels or something. Like, it's just, I can't fathom how quickly you'll be able to level characters up.
Mind-boggling. Yeah. And this is kind of what I think they were alluding to with the uncapped progression.
Yeah.
From what I understand, just from looking at some data mine stuff, again, I'm just going to keep repeating myself. I haven't played PTR yet, so I don't have a feel for how this works in practice, but you get these threads that you weave into the cloak, and that's how you permanently increase their stats. The cloak has primary on it, and it has stamina on it. It can have all the secondaries on it. It can have tertiaries on it, and the experience gain bonus. And I think the threads come in different like green, blue, purple qualities, which probably up the amount of stat that you get.
Right.
And you can just keep weaving them into the cloak and getting stronger and stronger. And it's an artifact, so all your characters benefit from it the same way that are in MOP Remix. And yeah, which means a couple different things. Like if you have a main that you're just blasting away on, now you want to start up another character, they're going to have a really easy ride because they get all of these stats and all this XP gain just off of that. It also means if you want to play a bit more like laterally, right, and play a couple different characters all at the same time, they're all contributing meaningfully to your Time Runner's Advantage.
Yeah.
So, you're not wasting, like, quote unquote, any time spent in the game or progression because it's all the same item that you're just powering up. And like obviously the primary switches based on whatever spec is active, and you're getting all this other stuff, man. Like I love this idea. I think this is the thing that ties it all together for me, where it's like, okay, you have this item that is sort of the through line for the whole thing, and that you always have this thing that you're powering up and is making your whole account stronger, really. And you can just contribute to it that way. So that's a really nice touch on top of just like the wackiness with the modular gems, and then you have this like steady drumbeat of power increase all the time. It reminds me almost of like Legion BFA type stuff where you had sort of that, that like long-term, like gradual power increase with the spikiness on top. I love that stuff. So this is really exciting to me on that level.
It is. You can earn titles. There's going to be various transmogs associated. You're going to be able to receive previously unreleased color variants of older mounts. So like brand new mount color variants of things. There's going to be a specific achievements that you can earn during the remix. And obviously they will become feats of strength when the event ends. And so, yeah, I mean, the biggest complaint I have about this entire remix is this is overlapping with a lot of other great World of Warcraft. We have we have Cataclysm Classic. We have Season of Discovery. We have the alpha and going into beta of the War Within. We have Dragonflight Season 4. We have the Plunderstorm thing that's wrapping up at the end of this month, but there'll be a slight overlap with this. Maybe
not.
You don't think so? I think this is supposed to come out with like around Season 4, is it not?
Well, no, it's in 10.2.7. So this is probably a few weeks out. So I think there won't be any overlap there. But your point stands. But this is sort of like, hey, did you like Plunderstorm? Do you want to do something else wacky? How about MOP Remix?
Yeah, on top of all the other versions of WoW that are out there. So the only complaint I have is that there's just so much darn World of Warcraft to play that chances are one thing's going to eat into another thing's gameplay, right? I mean, I'm hoping that we can get settled enough in Season of Discovery that I can raid log for a bit in Season of Discovery while I do this Mists of Pandaria remix. That's kind of what I'm hoping for, so that I can have more time of my, we've talked a lot about respecting players' time lately as far as how much time we have to game in a week. I want to be able to put a lot of time into this Mists of Pandaria thing. I definitely want to earn a lot of these rewards that are really neat. I know it's going to take a lot of time to earn them because they're not making it easy to do based off of what I've seen from PTR stuff. So if they're doing that and that's what we're getting into, I mean, Cataclassic's out. I'm not going to do normal classic. Season Discovery, I'm hoping I'm raid logging. Season 4, it would be cool to check out with Dragonflight. I just don't think I have the time to do it. So like it's hopefully like I can have the rest of my time go into this, but there's just so much to do. I think this might end up overshadowing Dragonflight Season 4 kind of severely, but I think that's okay. I think that's actually a good thing. One thing that I just want to point out too, I just want to talk about bronze just a little bit. Sure.
Because bronze is like your new vendor currency. Think of bronze as like it's flight stones plus crests all in one thing. Plus, it's also a vendor currency like a rep badge or something, or what you would get from an event, but it's unified. So you get bronze, like it's a reward from doing certain things. But also, if you remember the scrapper in BFA, there's essentially a thing that's a scrapper that you put gear that you don't want in, and it turns into bronze.
Yeah, toys, anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is sort of the main thing, is that like anything that you get, it's either going to be good and you're going to want to wear it and or upgrade it, or you're going to want to turn it into bronze. You can use your bronze for upgrades, or, I mean, there's just an absurd amount of stuff on vendors in terms of cosmetics and what have you. This is the kind of stuff that players have been asking for forever, man. Just to untether this stuff from, just luck, just dice rolls, and just let me grind it and let me buy it if I want to. You can't buy everything. They said, like, AOTC mount, I think it was MOP the first time they did AOTC mounts. I think so. Like, that's not going to be on the table. The challenge mode armor sets are not returning. There's some sacred cows. There's some stuff that is you had to be there for it, but a lot of the other just random chance-based drops are going to be on these vendors. They're going to be expensive, but if you put the time into the content, then you can just pick whatever you want off of the vendor. There is no auction house in Remix MOP, which is kind of weird. But, so that's going to be another different kind of factor to consider, I guess, right? Like the whole economy is going to be different than what we're used to because you're really going to be needing to find stuff on your own, right? I mean, you could trade stuff with people but, you're not going to be able to just buy a stack of whatever. I got to think professions are going to be really minimized here because you're just going to power up so much from gear and from stuff that you pick up and equip and and weave into your cloak or how you have your gem set up or whatever. But overall, I mean, this is a really bold swing. I was shocked to see that this is what this was going to be, and I honestly think this has potential to reshape the entire landscape of WoW, depending on how players react to it. I think there are ideas in here like the Cloak of Infinite Potential and like Bronze that seem like they're just solving problems that WoW has had for like 15 years.
Yeah.
And we'll see, we'll see how they actually feel in practice and over the course of the whole remix season and what player reaction and engagement is like. And, maybe what it comes down to is this is the leveling experience, or like this is what we do, or this is a leveling experience, or this is how we repurpose old content to keep it fun and vital. And, maybe at the end of every expansion, we revisit one era and do a time running through that era. Even so, you're talking about probably a good 5-6 months people can dig in and enjoy that stuff out of every 2 years. That sounds like a pretty good deal to me. So I think stuff like this, some of this seems really pointed at specific complaints that certain segments of the player base have had for a very long time in terms of gearing and cosmetic acquisition. And, I'm excited to see what it feels like to play and how people react to it. I will tell you this. My team was immediately talking about, all right, how are we going to work out the schedule in Season 4 to make sure we get a night of MOP in there? There was never any such thing like that for SOD or anything, stepping back into older content or whatever. But for this, it's like a no-brainer. I think this because it's tied into your retail account, all this stuff is shared, right?
Yep.
Maybe if that wasn't obvious, like if you buy a mount off a bronze vendor in MOP Remix, you have it on your retail account. So when you log into Dragonflight or War Within, then there it is for you, right? Like it's not this thing that's siloed off into a different environment. You're on whatever realms you choose to play that are live modern realms. I think it's the fact that it's way more intrinsically tied to your everyday like WoW playing experience, and your account makes it a lot more appealing to casual players. So yeah, I don't know, man. Like I had a hard time with this. I needed a minute. I'm reading it and I'm going, what are they talking about? And I started digging into it a little bit and looked at some stuff from data mining and looked at, some other reactions that people had to it. And I was like, man, I think they're really hitting some notes here. They're doing some really interesting stuff with this experiment. So we don't know exactly when it's going to come in, I guess. I mean, it is going to be with 10.2.7, but is it going to be 10.2.7 launch day, or is it going to be something that rolls out, after that? And 10.2.7 might still be like early, mid-May, something like that, based on this kind of schedule we've been on. So we got a little while here. This isn't going to be in the game this week or something, but definitely something to look forward to. And I think I might have to spin up PTR this week, man, if I get a chance, because I've just been really busy, but this is the thing I kind of want to make time for, because I want to get a feel for this before it's go time. It's just making my brain itchy in all those like RPG game kind of ways, and like how fun would it be in a few weeks time after this goes out? Like, hey guys, everybody get your MOP remix tunes set up. Make sure you get to level 25 because we're going to go do Mogushan Vaults on Sunday night and level up. Like, I'm so ready for that, man. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, I like the idea of leveling raids, so they definitely think they're touching on some really neat stuff with this experience. So yeah, we'll have to see how that all plays out. But moving into the last chunk that we want to chat about the show, Alpha, we already talked a little bit about the top of the show as far as the experience we had playing it, but you got to sit on a Q&A earlier today. So do you want to talk a little bit about that Q&A?
Yeah, sure. Blizz invited us to participate. They showed us there is a Wowcast about War Within Alpha that you have probably seen by now by the time that you're listening to this, but they let us see it a day early, and it was with Ian and with Tina Wong, who we know from BlizzCon's past, who is the associate art director these days.
She's cool.
And it was a great chat. It was really long. It was like almost half an hour, which is really long for a Wowcast. They had a lot of stuff to say. A lot of it was familiar to me, having now spent a good few hours in War Within, but there was some other stuff that was newsworthy that came out of that. I just want to say just a little bit of my actual experience with it before we get into some of these particulars. Like, the game is absolutely gorgeous. It's stunning how nice Isle of Dorn looks, even compared to what we're playing currently in Dragonflight. The assets are just incredibly detailed, and the scale of everything is just so massive. The vibe is really like Loch Modan kind of, you know, if Loch Modan was built in 2024 instead of 2004 or 1999, whenever they started putting the bones together. If you like that kind of dwarven vibe, this kind of the rough hewn stuff, like the big square shaped stones and everything's kind of jutting out of like the land itself, right? Stuff's like built into hills and cliff sides and stuff, and it also reminded me a lot of like Twilight Highlands from Cataclysm. There's a lot of those kind of vibes. It has its own identity for sure, but like the exterior is just breathtaking. The sense of scale, the verticality of it, the horizons, like. I said all the same stuff about Dragonflight, but this is 2 more years of iteration. And like, man, our beloved friend Gary Plattner's gone from the team, but the exteriors of this game just never miss. Like, these are just places that you just want to hang out in. You want to exist in them. And I think they killed it with Isle of Dorn.
It's always remarkable to me, because that was always the question I loved asking Gary when we got a chance to sit down with him, is like, what's the thing that you're working on right now that you're excited for players to see when it comes out in 2 years? Because that's what they like. By the time we're entering
world builders,
by the time we're entering beta or alpha for something, right? They finished the world building that they're doing. Like, the zones have been created, the different structures in them, all the trees, all the trains, all the carts, all the like everything's been made, all the piles of rubble, all the rocks, all that, like, it's all been created by them. They've shaped it all, it's done, and they're on to the next project. The next project is whatever's happening in 2 years for us, right? So they're working on Midnight is what they'd be working on right now, right? So you're like, okay, what's the thing that you're working on now in Midnight that you're excited for us, if you could share it, that is going to be happening? So I'm always excited to be able to talk with the world builders, because they often have the fun tools, or they're like, dude, there's this thing that I wish we had 2 years ago that we have now that I'm super thrilled that the tools team put together for us, and like. Now we can make different kinds of waterfalls that look more like waterfalls, and we can make, you're just like, oh, that's wicked. And you sort of see it and you're like, wow, you can really notice the innovation that those teams who collaborate together put into making something new and fresh inside of this incredibly old engined game that they have going on, right? That they've been holding together for a long time with a bunch of different sort of additions added onto it. So yeah, it's great to see what they can do with the art team over there. It's always impressive. And yeah, I mean, this won't disappoint when it comes to players as far as that goes. So I think the one thing experience-wise that I didn't get a lot of time to play, that I experienced that I want to point out was when I was sitting at character creation, creating my character, and there's a lot of different character creation options that I really like in World of Warcraft, but as I was making my character, there is music playing, and the music is for War Within. That music there was some of the only music that we really had access to that was the new music, and it's great. That team also never lets us down whenever they put out soundscapes and soundtracks. Like, it's very epic, exciting, makes you feel like you're in the right vibe for playing a fantasy fiction RPG style game. So that's another exciting thing too, is when you're just making your character or sitting there at that login screen, you'll have the new music, which is pretty exciting too.
Yeah, I think the presentation is just off the charts. Like, you kind of start, I don't want to spoil everything that happens or whatever, but just to give you an idea, like, there will be like a pre-expansion event, obviously, and I'm not going to talk about it on air. It's not testable, but I can put the skeleton together of what it's going to be based on what I played and looking at some other rewards that are in the system, like in the collections, right? So the pre-expansion event is going to lead into this happening, and you pretty much just hit the ground running in the alpha experience, where there are these Nerubians just like bursting out of the ground everywhere. They're assaulting this island. There's these dwarven-looking people who are like not affected by the curse of flesh, and you're trying to help them, and Jaina and Anduin and Thrall are running around, and you're also like rescuing these other characters that will be familiar to you if you've played recent expansions, including some that we haven't really seen since like Legion. Some of the Order Hall NPCs and stuff are there, which was really cool. But so then you kind of play through this story that is about, okay, what do the Earthen do in response to this Nerubian attack? They have to sort of recover and repair their home from the damage the Nerubians did, but the tribes of the Earthen are kind of far flung. We have to like bring the people together, and so that's sort of the story of Isle of Dorn is sort of how that all goes together. And I played through most of that. I played through that, actually, the whole zone main campaign, and I played some of the story quests. like the side quests. I think what I could find. We don't have a map. The map doesn't work in this build, so it's kind of hard to, if you stumble across something cool, but you don't really know where to go. And I did some delves, and delves were really fun. Really nice little bite-sized content. They're slick because you enter them and they're instanced, but there's no loading screen. You see it out in the world. There's like this foggy looking entryway, like a door, and you click on it, and it asks you if you actually want to enter the delve, and you can set your difficulty, and then you're in there, and then the instance starts up. The tech is really slick, and it's, I don't know. They were like maybe 8 to 10 minute experiences. It wasn't a ton of time in there, but it was nice. Each one had one was like I'm following a mine cart, right? There's these dwarves trapped in a mine, and they're being attacked by Nerubians, so I have to follow the mine cart and collect the dwarves and get them to safety and defeat the Nerubians, and then at the end you get treasure and you're happy, right? And then the other one was kobolds, and the kobolds had stolen some treasure, and the gimmick there was darkness. There was this encroaching darkness, so you needed to have a candle, and the candle would shrink as you move, so you had to like replenish your candle. Otherwise, if you're in the darkness, your max health would decrease, and eventually you work your way through, you find all the missing treasure, and you defeat the new kobolds. Look awesome too, like especially the huge muscular ones. And then at the end, you get like a treasure room. You get some gold. You get a decent amount of XP, and it is repeatable. It was. I got to like level 73 inside this experience, which I didn't even know you could do. I thought it was just 70 to 72, but the delve thing was pretty cool. I could definitely see this being a fun thing to do with your alts that like you don't really want to play at a high level, but you want to go do something, because you could get repeatable gear, you can get XP, you can get some other stuff. For example, there were mining nodes inside the delves, and Bran Bronzebeard is your companion for Season 1, so you could set him up as a tank or a DPS or a healer. I don't know about a tank, but you can set him up as a DPS or a healer, and he'll help you out and either heal you or attack your enemies. He also would like run around and mine nodes and then throw the ore that he mined at me, and so it'd be in my inventory. Cool. Yeah, so that was kind of a nice little feature. But yeah, part of it is like leveling up Bran, and then he gets new talents, and he helps you out more, and then you can push higher difficulties of it. But that wasn't really in the experience that we were playing. But man, I thought the interiors in the delves looked incredible. Just really cool spaces with cool props. The lighting effects, and there was a lot of dynamic lighting in the kobold one. They looked really cool. So I could definitely see myself playing these with alts that I don't want to do keystones with or something. Like I don't really know how to play this tune, or I don't really like it, or I'm not good at it. So I want something a little bit lower impact that I could do by myself. This is sort of, to me, what it really feels like is the natural extension of stuff like Sniff and Seeking, Ziscaro Vaults. Honestly, this is hard to say, maybe, but there's a lot of Torghast DNA in here. There are random powers you can get from treasures that are like, they're time limited. It's not about putting together this maxed out build of these Torghast powers, but you get these like time limited powers that deal lightning damage every 4 seconds for a minute around you, or shield you for some large amount for a minute and then explode when the shield breaks, stuff like that. Just stuff to give you a little bit of flavor. I noticed that they were a little bit randomized. Like there would be different mobs in there sometimes. The important mobs, like the rares, would be in different places. So there's a little bit of flavor on replay. And so, yeah, I thought they were a cool feature, and these are going to feed into Great Vault, if you remember from BlizzCon. PvP stuff is being removed from the Great Vault. That's going back to just straight up vendor, I think. Mm-hmm. And so you'll be able to earn Great Vault slots from participating in delves during the week. So that's also a cool, just a cool addition. I think delves are really going to resonate with a certain type of player, myself included. So I had a strong impression of all that stuff. Like I said at the top of the show, I wasn't really sure, like, once the stuff started rolling up, like, was the juice going to come back for me? Was I going to be like, hell yeah, it's time to play WoW? Because I haven't felt like that in a few months, like maybe this whole year. And I'm definitely feeling it. I feel rejuvenated after the events of the last week. I'm really excited to get into this stuff. So that's just kind of my experience with it. So let's talk about some more specific info that we got today.
There's two things I got to talk about experience-wise before we dive into the more specific info. First of which is the initial breadcrumb for this, for anyone who's curious, takes you, go figure, to Silithus, where the big sword is. All right, so if anyone's like, hey, I want to pre-position my character when all this is happening, and 3 months or 2 months or whatever it is, but more than that, probably 7 months when this goes live. Just be aware that Silithus is where everything's going to start. So there's going to be this big pile up that happens there near the big sword. As you know, that sword, that's the thing. This sword, that shirt that they were all wearing, that's the name of the quest. That's a nice little nod to the name of the quest for that. So some folks got into that, which I think was funny. And then outside of that, there was something else that I was thinking of initially when it came to delves and everything like that, but maybe it'll come back to me a bit later. But why don't you dive into what you got out of the interview today?
Sure, yeah. And I'm going to talk a bunch more about delves, so maybe it'll come to you as we'll kind of laying some of this stuff out. But so I was on a call earlier with Michael Bybee, who's a production director on WoW and a longtime Blizzard vet. He most recently worked on Diablo 4. He's with the company like 17 years. So a longtime vet who has circled back to WoW now after being gone working on Diablo for a while. And the other person on the call was Sean McCann, who is a senior game designer too, and he is heavily involved in Delves development. So a lot of info on Delves, and I think it is one of the big new features of the expansion. I think it's a gameplay hook that they hope that players enjoy and that they want to stand up as something that's going to be part of the game for years to come, right? So this is our first real look at playing it. So there are 11 tiers of Delves difficulty, and you select this on a drop down as you go in. I assume that there's like restrictions that you have to meet before you can go up any higher, but there are 11 difficulty tiers, and your companions level up to level 50. Your companion's progress, and Season 1 companion's Bran, is warbound. So you don't have to grind up Bran's levels multiple times. Again, the idea of you're not making a mistake by not maxing him out on one character first or whatever. Like, you're not wasting time, so to speak. All progress is progress on your account when you're in Delves with Bran. That's really nice because the companion seems like a really important part of the system. None of the stuff is locked in, obviously, but from what Sean was saying, somewhere around tier 8 or 9 will be the highest reward tier that Delves reward for Great Vault. So you don't have to be doing those maxed out tier 11s if all you want is the Vault gear. Like, if the higher difficulty is fun for you or more engaging, or you want to try to test yourself against it, then that's what you do. If you want you could stop a couple ranks short of that if it's for the Vault gear. He said it would probably end up being equivalent to about a Mythic 5. So that's like pretty decent gear from doing solo content, that is, you could really do at your own pace. There's no timer, right? Nothing like that. So that seemed really interesting. I would love to get some Mythic 5 equivalent gear for my alts from doing solo content, especially stuff I could put in a catalyst and turn into tier pieces. All good things. I really like that aspect of the system so far. There was a question about, will we see Delves in other continents, older world content, and basically the answer is no. For now they're just going to be War Within only, but they do really like the tech, so I think it's something we might see in other iterations somewhere, but not right now. He did mention the randomness in terms of encounters and spawns. One thing that he mentioned was that when you get in the higher level Delves, the scenario can totally change. So he gave the example of like the minecart Delve I was talking about earlier. At low level, that scenario is rescue the dwarves, get them into the minecart, and get through the Delve. At higher levels, you can roll one where you are in there with the Arathi, and your goal is to burn out all of the Nerubians from this mine. So you're actually burning up all the webs and killing the Nerubians. It's the point is not to save the dwarves. So that seemed kind of interesting to me, to tell a different kind of a story through there. He mentioned that they're excited about the tech and the opportunity in future content for storytelling. Sort of the question came up like, hey, is there going to be any class specific stuff ever again or in this expansion or whatever? So it wasn't a yes, but it was like, well, what if we did like a class specific quest line or content and presented it through a Delve? And that could be really cool. There are no affixes in Delves as such, like as we know from Keystones. Mob difficulty obviously scales up. Trap difficulty and damage and dangerousness and locations scale up, and also the map mechanics and different gimmicks scale up. So you're not going to have to learn some whole new wrinkle when you go to a higher tier, because now there's a thing that didn't happen before necessarily, or at least not as much as in maybe the Keystone system. But it'll be like, hey, that thing that didn't hurt you last year, now it killed you. So you better be careful out there. Sean did confirm that there will be a new companion in season 2 with new abilities to level up, but was not at liberty to disclose who it might be. But it seems like the idea is, okay, season refresh means at least somewhat of a refresh to delves and just some new stuff to interact with and check out and grind up, which sounds cool. That was my question to the panel. And I want to know about the flying machine. Like, the flying machine is a mount that you get from participating in delves, and it is a customizable one, like our dragons in Dragonflight. You can get all kinds of different parts for it, and they showed some examples that if you've seen the Wowcast, you'll see them. There's some really cool designs, and you can make some really unique looking machines out of the parts that are going to be available. Sounds like it will be the only customizable mount. Like, it is the main focus. I wanted to know if there'd be other types of mounts, or different theming, but it seems like that is the delve mount for War Within. But still, I mean, the variety of the shown is pretty impressive. And then the last point on delves was about how repeatable are they or whatever. There are no limits for how many of them you can do per week. There is a limit to how many rare and epic keys you can get, but you can always walk in and play. There are, and just for my own context for that, at the end of the delve, once you've completed the objectives and defeated the boss or whatever you need to do, there's a treasure room. There's some piles of gold on the ground, which you run over and pick up Plunderstorm style. And then there's chests. And by default, you have a green chest that you can open. And there's some stuff in there, and a piece of gear, and some crafting mats, and some vendor trash. And then there's a blue chest and a purple chest. And I did not have occasion to be able to open either of the higher ranked chests. So I'm not exactly sure where the keys come from. I don't know if it's just like a random drop based on stuff that you do inside the delves or whatever. And the reasoning that Sean said behind this was they didn't want a situation where the correct thing to do for gearing or what have you was just to grind delves. Like, delves should be part of the overall experience, and they should be a way that you can get gear, but they wanted to put some kind of limit on the higher end rewards for it, just to bring it in line with other modes and stuff. So, which makes sense. And I think, like, again, because of the nature of the systems with warbands coming in and the way the companion works, like, I think you're going to have occasion to do these with more than one character a lot. So even if you have burned through your rare and epic keys on your main, like, you're probably going to still want to do some of these during the week. So I think it's okay. It all makes sense. But yeah, a lot of info for delves. It is a big new signature feature for this expansion. So, and you got one of the senior developers on delves in the room. So yeah, we had a lot of questions come up and a lot of insight into sort of where they see it landing in the overall kind of menu for War Within.
Yeah, so it's delves themselves. I didn't think of the question I had for delves. I did think about the fact about warbands, because you mentioned it a few times where when I was experiencing doing warbands, if I'd completed a quest on one of the characters you created and I completed a quest, went back to that quest on another character that was created, it would actually tell me that I'd already completed this quest in my warband. So it tells you sort of whether there's a new quest that you're experiencing for the first time or not, which was kind of a neat thing about warbands. As far as delves go, though, I'm looking forward to it. I think it looks like great content. I think a lot of the balance that they're pushing as far as trying to make the content more aligned with, hey, this is a Mythic 5. We don't want to overdo the rewards here because there's a danger of that. I think those are good concerns to have. But I guess since I'm coming from Season of Discovery, where like the most efficient way to level was, this go around was doing the event that they added in and the Emerald Nightmare stuff. And the best way to level last time was just grinding dungeons nonstop. Like, I would hate to see that the best way to level going into War Within was doing delves nonstop all of the time. Because I feel like you're angling for a bad experience for players. In the sense that if that becomes the most efficient way to do something, even if that's gearing up, leveling, whatever it is, you're going to put players in a position where they're missing out on so much of the awesome content that you're designing. So I do hope that they're finding the balance on these, and this is the right time. Like, alpha is a great time to be doing these sort of considerations. Yeah. So it's good to hear them talk about it, and it's good to see them aiming that way for it.
I think for just my perspective on what you're talking about, and I agree. Like, I mean, we've talked about it a lot in various,
Yeah.
forums on the show over the years. Like, nothing should ever be the correct way to do anything when it comes to like leveling a character.
Yeah.
Yes, these do grant XP. Uh, maybe like 5-ish% of a level for about a 10-minute experience, So it was in line with about what I would do with outdoor quests or something, It wasn't some absurd a bounty of XP that was coming in from finishing these. But I guess the benefit is it's repeatable and it's instanced, so you don't have any competition for anything going on in there, right? So if you really want to play at your own pace or whatever, whatever your particular taste is, then that might be appealing. But it didn't seem like really questing seemed like it was a much bigger XP yield overall. Unfortunately I didn't get in any dungeons. I sat in the dungeon queue all night last night, but there's only a small handful of us playing probably. But yeah, I think they're trying to keep all that stuff in line. It didn't seem like it was a huge XP bounty to me.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking of was, and bear in mind, this is when my brain starts to get a little slow is this time of the evening. So some things are coming and going from my thought process as we sort of talk about this. But was, as far as leveling experience goes, making sure that players have a fairly streamlined experience as to where they're headed zone-wise. And I think what I've seen so far, they do a pretty good job of guiding you around with the main story, and they've captured a lot of what they captured from the past couple expansions with that. So I think that's a good note as well, is going, hey, you know what? A lot of this needs to be on the rails in the sense that, hey, yes, you can go to other zones earlier and there's going to be different routes people figure out over the span of time there. But for someone who's here for the story and wants to experience the story and do it, I think they do a good job at pointing in the right direction for all that sort of thing. It'll be easier once we can see a map, obviously, but alpha is alpha. So we'll see how that goes down the line as well.
Right. I think my only concern to your point there is that this seems like a very linear story progression. Like you are going from Isle of Dorn to Ringing Depths to Hallowfall to whatever Nerubian land is called, right? And that's it. So everybody's starting in the same place and moving in the same direction. So, that sometimes has created issues in the past, but we'll see how that plays out once it's live. So a couple other notes from the Q&A regarding alpha and production around alpha. There's going to be new content every week. Kind of similar to what they did with Dragonflight. There's going to be a new build every week that spotlights some kind of new content. And what they're really trying to do is zero in on player feedback around whatever is testable to try to tweak that and just really like funnel everybody into one aspect of the expansion and then get as much feedback about that as they can and then move on. And then what Mike said, the production director, was once they feel like they have all the features in an alpha, then they'll put the beta tag on it. And then there was a question about like when can we expect the expansion to come out, which like they're not going to announce because that's not the point of this.
It wouldn't be a Blizzard group interview without people asking questions that they absolutely can't answer. All right, it is what it is.
Yeah,
I don't know why, but it is.
We were talking to the production director and the game designer on Delves, and there were a lot of PvP questions, and they kind of looked at each other in the Zoom window, and they went, well, we can't really answer that, but we think it's like this.
Yeah.
But, that's how it goes.
It is.
So, I mean, Mike Bybee made a really strong point to emphasize that feedback is very important to them, and it is impacting their approach to all this stuff. He said that, like, feedback could... it could have an impact on the shipping timeline because they want to get it right and they want people to be happy with it. And
that's an exciting statement. I want to really highlight that is a exciting statement, man.
Yeah. So, it's really informing their design process. And, if that means the expansion is going to be a bit later, it sounds like, I'm sure there's like some upper bound, right? Where it's like, okay, it's good enough because they do have to sell the game. But, it's, they really want player feedback and they want to design a game that players are going to be happy with, So that was just a note on overall production for the alpha. Hero talents came up a bit, as you might imagine. And, Mike said that, the goal is to avoid increasing bloat, and it's more about finding things that are awesome about the class, and especially the class fantasy, and expanding on them. And I got to say, like, I only really played with Mountain Thane for Prot Warrior because, I mean, first of all, I've been waiting for that for 5 months since they announced that was going to be. And more broadly, I've been waiting for some flavor like that in Warrior for 20 years. It was really fun. I think really flavorful, looked really cool, like when the lightning strikes would go off. And I think the entire tree does not introduce one new button. I think the entire Mountain Thane tree just modifies existing abilities. So there is no way to even add an extra action button at all. Colossus is the other choice for Prot Warrior, and that like baseline adds one button, but I think that's it. So
did you end up with an extra talent point when you finished specking out your talent tree? Your talent tree?
I didn't, but I just used the starter build. So maybe there was some logic in there where it just like filled it in and stopped yelling at me.
I used the actual, hey, talk to the Tauren, he'll put you to 71 and unlock all hero talents for you. Was what the talent did. And so I did that, and I ended up with an extra talent point on my druid, which I assume is just a bug in how many talent points he's granting. But I did submit it because I'm a good alpha tester and I submit things that I notice that are weird. But it made me really curious because there were two for druid. One was very Elune based, and one was the guardian of the grove, keeper of the grove. And the Elune based one was very dot oriented. And obviously moons, using your moons, using a lot of stellar stuff. And then obviously the keeper of the grove actually was very treant based, which was pretty cool. So I went with keeper because the build that I'd sort of initially put together for myself for leveling, I basically was like, what's my best sort of leveling build that I'd want to roll with? Not thinking at all about balance or tuning because that's all over the place right now. So I just sort of picked abilities that I wanted. Ended up a lot more treant sort of based leveling style stuff, doing larger pulls, that kind of thing. And it was cool, man. It was like rolling around with a posse of treants. You basically summon these things in. You can have a reduced cooldown if you want. You can have them deal either 100% increased melee damage or have 50% more health as one of the selections. They can moonfire targets and sunfire targets. They cast on targets. And you can you basically cast them and have them just tear around wrecking stuff. Like it really does feel like you're calling in your posse to sort of roll with you as you're sort of leveling through stuff. So I can do really big pulls, have the treants come in, they taunt everything off of me. They have 50% more health, so they live a really long time. I do more damage while they're up. They're doing damage themselves. It like in general stuff felt like it really melted. And they obviously warn you a lot with like, hey, unlocking the hero talents the way that they're doing it, as far as like the level 71 Tauren cheat basically that they give you, is going to make things feel really unbalanced because you're going to have way more power now than you would, and they'll scale it back a certain amount because this is the test experience, but it is going to feel that way. So like it felt really cool. I like the idea of it enhancing an ability in a particular way. I have to see what it's going to be like when the actual thing launches and how often I'm switching back and forth between the two different playstyle types. Because I don't think I would end up going treants in a raid environment. If I was raiding Mythic, I think I'd be a loon and be running that way for damage. It'd be a lot more damage based because you're sustaining on multiple targets with dots, that being a lot of damage. Less about having a bunch of treants you call in every 40 seconds unless there's really particular situations where that's going to be good. So that might make me switch back and forth where like when I'm out in the world doing my own solo stuff and trying to do my dailies and whatnot, I would roll around as, my treant build, but then I'd switch my hero talents over to a loon stuff when I did raid content, or maybe treants are probably a lot better for Mythic Plus because they pull and hold aggro and threat and they do a lot of damage. Well, at the same time, you'd be using more Elune-based stuff for raid. That I could see as well. I think Elune-based stuff's going to be really strong for PvP. Treants are going to be cool for PvP. I just don't think they're going to hold up compared to Elune-based stuff from what we've seen. So between those two, if I'm bouncing back and forth a lot, I think that creates a lot of dynamic and sort of fun playing around with the build. The concern I had was, hey, if I'm not doing that, if I am just picking my hero talents and it's going to be keeper, and keeper ends up being the best thing for me in all of the places that I'm using it, and I'm not bouncing back and forth at all, like this is just like a non-existent thing, right? Because you do just put all your talent points into that one frame and then it's done. Like there's not really choices that you're switching around that much inside of that talent frame for what you're doing. So there might be 2 skill points that you can shift between choices that you have, but outside of that, you're not going to be playing around with it too much. And I don't want it to be a system that you're just totally unengaged from once you've hit max level. I do like the idea of shifting stuff up and changing around your hero talent. So I hope they hit a balance point with a lot of classes where we do see people, depending on the activity they're doing, going, oh yeah, give me a sec, let me change up my play style in a really fun and dynamic way through these hero talents to be able to do this. And I think that could be a lot of fun for players to get involved in, and I hope that's what we see coming out of these hero talents.
Yeah, I think for each of the warrior trees there was like 2 choice nodes each. But other than that, you're collecting all the talents. By the time you hit level 80,
you just have everything. Yeah,
you have everything. It really is a lot like artifact traits in Legion, except for the fact that you can flex them around. They're super flexible. I did not do the unlock all my hero talents thing. I played like just more of a traditional level up, and like if you can switch between your hero specs at any time, just like anything else with your talent builds post Dragonflight. You get like 1 baseline hero talent per tree, and then you get an immediate like point at level 71 when you unlock the system. So you actually get 2 new abilities at 71. And you can pick 1 talent, and then you can just switch it on the fly whenever you want to, just like any other talent. So that's really cool. If you remember the very early days of Legion, it was like, oh, make sure you go in this direction around your artifact tree because this is your most powerful ability. So you want to get that first, and you want to get your second most powerful ability. Like, there's nothing that's going to be even remotely punishing for any length of time with this system, which is cool. I thought it was really slick and felt really good to just swap stuff around and just have that flexibility to try something else out if I wanted to. So, yeah, that was really encouraging about the way it's been implemented. Just obviously a lot of lessons learned over the years for something like that.
Yeah.
One thing was funny was somebody asked the question about, are we going to see more augmentation evoker style support specs or classes?
This was asked at BlizzCon. We were in an interview where someone asked that same question twice. 2 different times they asked it in that same interview. Yeah. Yeah.
And so Mike's answer was like word for word. He said, I don't think you all want more support classes.
Yes.
And he gave the example of sort of just overall feedback to augmentation, but also the blog they put out a while back for what priest hero talents were shaping up like. And there was that one spec that leaned into more of a support role, and feedback was really negative on that. And, that obviously, I think the team is shifting course away from that. He said that they don't like the experience where it feels like you always need a particular spec or class, and that feedback is really vital to shaping hero talents. And that's one of the things that he also mentioned was, like, coming out of BlizzCon, they wanted to get the blogs out as fast as they realistically could because they wanted as much player feedback on them as possible. They really want this to be cool. He did say there won't be any more blogs or anything like that once Alpha opens because you could just get in and check them out. This is not like Shadowlands Alpha where there's only like 1 or 2 classes in right now. Everything's just in there so you can check out all the different specs. I imagine that public alpha will be out in another few days as we're recording this, so we'll get a lot more info about that stuff.
Yeah, I'm hoping that what we see is Thursday or Friday this week, they do a flagging of accounts for alpha. For those who are curious how the alpha process works, currently for internal, they basically create a bunch of accounts that have access to it, and then they give those accounts out to people, which means you have to log out of your Battle.net launcher, log into the Battle.net launcher using the accreditation that they give you, and then once you've logged in that way, you can then have access to this mainline server that they have set up for you to be able to play on. And that is how that works. So I'm hoping that we start seeing accounts actually flagged for it so that you on your normal Battle.net launcher can select alpha and jump into the alpha experience and experience it. So that's what I'm looking forward to. And I think it'd be great to start getting a lot of players in there, and hopefully they have the infrastructure to do that, because it'd be pretty sweet to see a large chunk just get in there and start playing around this thing.
Fingers crossed this week we get public alpha, because, man, I want to get back in there. And I want to get, hopefully, with my own account data. I didn't have any of my account data at all, which is, I mean, like, it's always great to be included in these things, but there are hoops you have to jump through to get, anything out of the experience. So looking forward to public alpha, hopefully. There's a couple interesting questions about warbands. And they made it very clear warbands are fully account-wide. They're realm agnostic. They are region-locked. The region is still an impenetrable barrier, but like no matter what realms your tunes are on, or what, it's not like your Storm Rage warband and your Area 52 warband. Your warband is your warband. Yeah. It's all the characters on your Battle.net account. There was a question about kind of sharing gear between warbands or members of a warband.
Yeah, they're war-bound items. Yeah, that was something
there's
we
a
talked
couple
about
different. Yeah, there's a couple different flavors of gear, and I did find some of this stuff actually as I was just killing rares and stuff in Isle of Dorn. There are items that are designated warbound until equipped, and you can move them between any character on your account until you equip it, and then it becomes soulbound.
That makes sense.
Then there's also warbound equipment that you can move back and forth. They did say that they want to have warbound gear that's available up like until right before that kind of higher upper echelon of content and rewards. So it should be stuff that should be able to get you into like organized rating and stuff, I would think, which sounds really good. The most exciting thing I think was a non-announcement, but somebody asked a question like, are we going to be able to ever use our warband as followers in follower dungeons? So we're essentially doing a follower dungeon with our own other characters as NPCs.
Yeah, that came up with BlizzCon too. That was a cool one.
Yeah, and they kind of looked at the camera and they said, nothing for launch.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that dream is alive. That would be awesome. That'd be such a cool feature. So that's just some highlights of the Warbands discussion. A couple points on raiding. They said that there's going to be a more structured raid release around War Within launch, and Season 1 will launch a little bit after General Access. Remember, we do have that early access period, and that sounds like it's going to work similar to sort of how Diablo 4 worked. It sounds like it's going to be the end of the week, probably like Thursday afternoon would be my guess, will be like early access for War Within. It'll be through the weekend, and then the game will launch, in full release early the following week. And then it sounds like we're getting at least one whole week with like no season roll, maybe even longer than that. So we'll have a little bit of time to really experience the story, level up characters, get ready to go before we have the pressure of the season coming in, which is really to be expected. But I think it's worked out pretty well. I do not like having that pressure of like, okay, I got to get in, level up, and kit out like the first week so I can raid the second week. Like, we can let it breathe a little bit more than that. There was a question about follower raids, which I thought was really interesting, because I hadn't considered that. And the response was basically they're going to wait and see. And a lot of it depends on follower dungeons. If follower dungeons prove to be popular, they may decide to do more with the system, including incorporating raids. This is not an announcement. I'm not announcing this or anything. I'm just relaying the thought process. So it sounds like it's not off the table currently, but it's something that's going to depend on how people engage with follower dungeons and what kind of feedback they get about it. A question came up about, will we see a return to any smaller size raid instances, like 1 to 3 boss encounters? And they said there was nothing to announce right now. It doesn't sound like this will be part of anything in War Within, but they kind of mentioned it's always on the table. It's kind of depends on the overall story and content structure of an expansion, but it's not like it's not something they'll never revisit, but there's no plans right now. There was a question about sort of incoming raid difficulty and sort of the path forward for raid difficulty, and sort of the idea that Mythic Farak might end up being the least killed Mythic end boss of all time.
Yep.
Mike said, a direct quote from Mike was that the last 2 bosses in Amir Drasil were on a totally different difficulty level, which I thought was really interesting. And he kind of talked about, balancing accessibility versus challenge when it comes to building raids and building the different difficulties, because you need to make the content accessible, but also there are those players who want that really high level challenge. He did say that they do have a goal to smooth that out more in War Within, so at least it's on their radar. Obviously this is not, he can't make any kind of promise like, oh, don't worry, it's going to be easier to get CE in War Within Season 1. Like, but he's not going to say that, but
yeah,
it was obviously a discussion they've been having,
Well, I imagine Season of Discovery has led a chunk of that discussion where they're basically going, all right, this has been a very successful thing with these leveling raids. We're now doing remix for Pandaria with leveling raids. We are seeing players surge to this content on a level that we don't normally see them do that. We should probably look at doing this for the live game. Like, I find it hard to believe they would not go, yeah, we need to follow suit a little bit better with live game as far as getting this content under control. I mean, I talked to you, we had a quite a good discussion a couple episodes ago about, hey, when it comes to raid content, maybe having some sort of expected time where nerfs come in for players would be a helpful thing. Like, just straight off the bat going, all right, we know that 2 weeks after launch, this is when first wave of nerfs are going to come in for the first 6 bosses or something, right? And we know that a month after launch, we're going to see a wave of nerfs happen at this point, so that teams that are struggling on those bosses, as you sort of did with Plunderstorm, going, hey, I'm gonna wait because I think they're going to do this thing, would know, right? If they'd announced 4 weeks ago that the last 2 weeks of Plunderstorm are going to be 100% increased, reputation gain, a lot of people would have been like, oh, okay, I'll wait for that, right? Similar thing with raiding. It'd be interesting to see players go, okay, we're just going to farm normal and heroic. That's what we're going to focus on for the next, month, because we know, because they've announced it, there's going to be big nerfs that hit mythic content at that point, and that'll be an interesting point to sort of step in and start seeing how we do with this content, right? I think giving players that expectation would just be a healthy thing to do for the community, because a lot of the discouragement and people leaving and people not wanting to do the content comes from just beating your head against a wall and being like, that's not fun. It's not how I want to spend my time. So yeah, I think that's a good direction.
It's a tough balance to strike, right? And they're not always going to get it right, and they're going to get it right every time.
Yeah.
They had some kind of offhanded comments about overall tuning and gear acquisition rates and stuff, and they both sort of said something to the effect of like, if we ever get it perfectly right, then the game's dead. Like they're always trying. There's always something they could do different, some different approach they could take, some way they could do it better. Right. And so yeah, I think that applies to. They weren't talking about raid difficulty specifically with that, but I think it applies to that as well. A couple quick hitters that didn't really fit into any of the broader categories. There was a question about professions. Really, it's just an extension of the Dragonflight systems, and I didn't play around with this too much, but it was very familiar. It's just a new, you have to go to your blacksmithing trainer and learn Kaz Algar blacksmithing and mining, and then skill those up, and then you have new talent trees and everything like that. One thing that is incredible that was actually announced in the Wowcast is that a big overhaul coming to crafting orders is they're adding NPC crafting orders. So if you want to just work on your crafting orders, get your quests done, get your profession skill ups and whatever, there will be orders that you can just fill, which is fantastic. It's been a weird progression with that system over Dragonflight.
That's going to be an interesting one, I think, for a lot of returning players, because I think we are going to get a huge surge of players coming back with War Within. The overhaul to the crafting profession system is huge. And even as someone who did not play Dragonflight nearly as much as I used to, I still play Dragonflight a decent amount. It still is something that I'm not 100% comfortable with. I'm just saying, in general, the crafting order system, how they work, how the whole item upgrade system works, that kind of stuff. If you weren't engaged in that system on a, reasonable basis regularly, it was pretty easy to get kind of obscured. So I do hope that they have a more intuitive way or almost a helpful tip or hint mode for that stuff for players coming back in, because it is a very large step and difference away from what we've seen in World of Warcraft pre-Dragonflight for professions. It's a good step. It's just a very, very large step.
And it's really dense, and it's a real time commitment to really max it out. Yeah. So, but I think having more accessible crafting orders will lubricate a lot of that stuff, because you'll be able to get more skill ups and everything like that. So, I think that's a really nice change. You were kind of talking about earlier when we get our first look at new stuff, finding out about new techniques, new stuff, new tricks in the bag. And Mike talked about one thing that I thought was really interesting, because they have new tech for the ocean and the shoreline. They have new textures and lighting and rendering for water hitting the shore. And I noticed this when I was playing the alpha prior to the call. There's a storyline where you have to help this Earthen who is, I forget what they call it in the storyline, but basically his job is to help the Earthen that are about to shut down, which is like their version of dying, to transition out. But he himself is now about to shut down, and he really wants his final resting place to break with tradition, and because he loves the shore and he wants to go to the shore. And it was a beautiful quest line. The story that it told really touched me. I thought it was a really well done storyline, and I'm standing there, my character, and I'm going through the dialogue and stuff, and we're standing out there on the shore as the waves are kind of lapping in, and we're in these little tide pools and stuff, and it was gorgeous. World of Warcraft does not look like this, and water and stuff in World of Warcraft does not look like this. So it's incredible. It's really incredible new tech. It's just absolutely gorgeous. But they also mentioned there's going to be an update and an overhaul to the default UI for managing groups, like the raid leader management panel and everything, which is long overdue. So that's nice to hear. they also kind of teased that Plunderstorm and MOP remakes are just the beginning as far as like experimental content. The team is really taking a lot of new approaches. They have a lot of ideas that they want to, bring forward. So that's kind of exciting to hear. Somebody asked about, if legendaries were going to follow the model of Dragonflight, and if they were happy with kind of how that worked out, going back to more of a traditional kind of idea for legendaries. And Mike said, I don't think we're ready to talk about legendaries yet, but thanks for the question.
Yeah.
So that was pretty funny. And we probably won't see any legendaries in War Within. In patch content, yes, but not in the initial release. And then one other note, this is kind of a bummer. This is something that is, I think this is pretty much ironclad, because somebody asked about cross-region, and they said no specific cross-region plans are being worked on. So I don't think there's even a specter of the regional barriers coming down at this point. Like, if it wasn't there's nothing for launch, or, we have plans, but we're not ready to talk about that yet. It was, we do not have any plans. So that's kind of a bummer. It would be great but I would imagine the tech hurdles there are so severe. And, we are getting cross realm guilds and a bunch of other new tech. They're breaking a bunch of old stuff up for this release. So I got to feel like the regional barriers are probably not the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to ways that they can modernize some of this stuff. But, take that as you will. It sounds like that is nowhere near on the radar at this point.
Yeah, I as much as I wanted the cross-region play, and I know a lot of people have been talking about it and asking about it, it's got to be something that's written on a whiteboard inside someone's office. But whether or not they're actually spending the time to investigate what tech is needed and how it would affect the game code and everything else, I don't know if they're there yet. But I'm sure it's on someone's whiteboard for, somewhere down the line to be brought up and discussed and have something happen with it. If I was going to take a wild stab in the dark, I would say that it's the .25 patch of when we're doing War Within. That's my guess. It'd
be great. I mean, I would love to see it go away.
A year away.
If they could, if they possibly could, if they can overcome those hurdles, it would be such a boon to players everywhere if everybody could just play together, basically. And China's back now. We haven't even talked about it on the show, but that's a whole other story. That barrier will never be crossed. But they do. Yeah. They have a lot of different regional players to serve. So it would be great if they could do it. But it sounds like it's not on the horizon to me. But we'll see. Overall, I think it was a great presentation. I was really impressed. I had a lot of fun inside the alpha. I think they're doing some really smart things with the gameplay. I liked a lot of what they had to say about sort of their approach and what our expectations should be coming into this stuff. So I'm excited, man. I'm more excited than I thought I would be, to be perfectly frank. I was like, okay, well, we'll check this out and see what it is. But I think they're really just crushing it right now. So I'm ready to jump in on this stuff. And thanks to the WoW team for inviting us, letting us participate a little bit and get a taste and just sit down with the devs for a little bit. It was really nice. And I don't know, man. It exceeded my expectations. I'll just put it that way.
Good. It should. I think that I would love to see more. So hopefully I get the opportunity to do so, because I think that's pretty much where I'm at is, hey, let me see more of this and we'll see how it all sort of stacks up. But from what I've seen, I'm hopeful that things are going to go well. I will say, another example of when I was setting up my bars and everything, I put fewer abilities on my bars than I thought I would, which, like, I have fewer abilities on my bar than I do in the live game, which is different. So I'm happy that we're getting rid of some bloat with how they're sort of going about it. And that was just me throwing together a leveling build. And obviously if I had 5 or 6 more on use abilities that you can choose inside your tree, those add, sort of bulk up your bar a lot. But I really like not having that many, because I'm now used to SOD Classic, where you really don't. You use 12 buttons, and that's the most amount of buttons you use, and you don't have to worry about anything else too much, really. So I enjoy that, and I think that that's a good direction to move, and I'm glad the hero talent stuff is moving in the, hey, at most we'll add one ability button that you press direction. So yeah, thanks again for getting in there and checking out the interview today as well, and be able to share some of the information with folks about that. And I guess with that, we will move into the Patreon part of our show, where this is the time where we take to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us improve on the content we create. And today I'm going to give a special shout out to Arajian, Celian, James, Kapowie, Max, Pinky, Shorel, and Rager. Thank you so much for everything that you all give. You help make this show the better show than it can be every week. Every week we try and improve and keep the hosting bills and everything going. And thank you to all of our patrons who help keep the lights on. We have a newest patron here, Orok Bull, who was able to hop in there and support the show as well over at patreon.com/thestartingzone. You all make this something that we fit into our schedules every week because we want to be sure we are delivering every week when it comes to a show like this so that our patrons can get this, content. I know I warned everyone in Discord on Monday that there wasn't going to be a Monday record and release this week because of NDA reasons. Jason and I are both bound contractually to not talk about this stuff until after a certain time on Wednesday, which is why the show has to come out on Wednesday. So that was the situation we're in, but we'll be back on Monday next week and get an episode out for everybody. And I'm looking forward to it. And I love making the show, and patrons help make that possible. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, patrons, past and present, and welcome aboard Auric Bull. Thank you for the support of the show. And this week we wanted to do, we knew it was going to be a big week. And so we had to, so it ends up being a long day for both of us, but to slot in like a special record, this is a really long episode because we got so much to cover, but it's an exciting time, man. I think the live game is, obviously cycled down a bit, but we're just on the cusp of big reset and a new treadmill to grind for a little while. Plunderstorm is now in this sort of frenzy mode as it winds down. MOP Remix was a shock announcement and really exciting stuff that we're going to be playing all summer probably. And then War Within Alpha and, just a great look at what we're going to be getting into later this year. And so it's, we were kind of collectively as a player base, like holding our breaths for this stuff to get kind of past this 10-2-6 and into the season roll and beyond, because we knew once season 4 is at the door, then it's time to really get down to business with the new expansion and all this stuff. And so here we are. It's just going to be a real roller coaster ride, I think, all the way through War Within launch. And then the team is just approaching the way this game is developed and published in a way that they never have before, and that's really cool.
Yeah All right, if you folks have enjoyed this episode, consider heading on over to your iTunes, your Apple Podcast, leave us a 5-star review. They really help out our show, and we love reading reviews written by our listeners. We don't have any in right now, so if you leave us a 5-star, we'll probably get on our next episode. So please take the time to go over to your iTunes, your Apple Podcast, and leave us those reviews. That wraps up episode 627 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, you can head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. You can also reach out and leave us your feedback, if you have fish, feedback, or ask your question.
Fish, please. You can just keep your bass.
Yeah. This reminds me of the shark fins that everyone sends Sparty. You can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com or reach out to us on Twitter at thestartingzone or over on Discord at thestartingzone.com/Discord. If you want to get some TSC gear, you can find that at TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/thestartingzone. We got shirts and mugs and stickers and stuff. And Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
The best place to find me, as always, is over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald. You can also find me on Blue Sky. It's just J Lucas over there, so letter J and Lucas. You can also find my video channels at twitch.tv/Shieldwald and youtube.com/Shieldwald. They've been dormant for a while, but they're about to start spinning back up. I wanted to capture some stuff and put it on YouTube, but I just didn't get the opportunity because I didn't really have a good chunk of uninterrupted time to sit down and play Alpha and in a way that I could record it. So unfortunately, nothing there, but I'm going to stream some Season 4 next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, possibly Sunday. And once Public Alpha starts spinning up, I'll be streaming that once I'm allowed to, and assuming I have access to it. So yeah, check out the video channels. I've been offline for like 3 months now, but I'm going to come back pretty soon.
Nice. If you're trying to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey, also over there on Blue Sky if you're looking at that. My Twitch channel is /SpencerHD. And my YouTube channel is at SpencerHD. So if you're looking for any of those, you can find me over on those. And with that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening, and jobs done.